Previously in Hedge Knights, Dave spent his recovery time reorganizing the keep's storage. The monument to fallen soldiers was repaired after being damaged by previous raids. An auxiliary gate was built to allow adlets to bypass the main gatehouse. Arauco felt inspired and asked others to help cut limestone for a sculpture, and the grand altar in the prayer room was completed. Episode 18, Experimentation. The members of the Bison Glade were very excited for Arauco to finish his art project, and decided to put a lot of effort into making sure that he was well supplied with stone. Megahoof was focused on coming up with multiple experiments in order to successfully relocate a salix tree to the Bison Glade. The squires discussed an appropriate name for likely the last calf to be born in the Bison Glade, at least until grazing areas could be purified. Bastion was agreed upon in a unanimous vote. The area next to the sculpting bench could serve as a temporary place for the cut limestone blocks until Arauco had enough material to start his project. In a few days' time, the first day of spring would come to their frosty glade. Megahoof hoped to embark upon his planned journey to other glades for salix trees just after they celebrated the Advent, like they did yesteryear. There was a lot of work and preparation to be done before then, and he felt stressed to meet his self-imposed deadlines. Sapo felt like the ambrosia bushes appeared as if they were ready to wither and go dormant like they had done before, so despite the fact that they weren't fully grown, he harvested them anyway. Arauco noticed that there was enough stone for him to embark upon starting his art project, and let the others know that they didn't need to urgently cut stone any longer. Sapo's intuition was indeed correct. Just a few hours after he harvested as much ambrosia as he could, over 2/3 of the bushes withered and disappeared. Shellbell had a birthday coming up. And just like when Bash turned 3, Shellbell was looking forward to getting a full-size bed. Adlets didn't have much in the way of gifts to offer children, but a full-size bed was more than enough to satisfy the little tyke. Arauco had never sculpted with stone. The only art he had attempted before was whittling wood with blades, lathes, and axes. He had seen others use chisels and hammers to shape stone, and had instruction about the process as well, but had never himself attempted it before. Much like the knots and burls in wood, stone had its own inner shape and flow, and he initially found it difficult to perceive the inner structures of the stone, but after some practice and quite a few pieces of wasted stone, he got the hang of that technique. Megahoof and Judea decided it was time to allow Bash beyond the curtain walls. He desired to run in nature and watch clouds and stars, and had been asking for permission for several seasons. Finally, his parents came around to the idea. If he was to handle himself in the hostile world that he lived in, he would have to get accustomed to its dangers at a young age. One thing that no adlet felt accustomed to was the oppressive and smothering smog. No matter how many times it would roll into their glade, their eyes still stung and their lungs still burned. Even the bison had the good sense to stay in their tiny, overcrowded barns during the smog. Unfortunately, too much work needed to be done for the adlets to do the same. As unpleasant as it was to mine during the acidic smog, Tangier knew that every swing of her pick would help alleviate the need to clean the encroaching pollution. She thought about the times that even her own bedroom became covered in the blight, and pushed through the burning sensation in her face and lungs, knowing her contributions would be appreciated. Megahoof was nearly finished with his research and decided to sleep on everything he had planned before finalizing his experiments. He was used to uncovering lost knowledge in journals, recipes, logs, and transcripts, but had never conducted scientific research before, not unless you count resurrecting extinct crops from ancient seeds. He felt like he had spent more than enough time studying the problem, and in the morning he would take action and come up with multiple potential solutions for their Salix problem. Having slept upon his research, Megahoof drew up 3 different recipes for 3 separate experiments to conduct on the Salix trees. But first, he needed a proper alchemy bench. In researching the Salix roots, he decided to try to create 3 different special extracts in order to attempt to stabilize the tree for transport. One would be made of tea, one of ambrosia, and one a hybrid of the 2. He collected what he needed to distill the first of the extracts, psychite tea, herbal medicine, and some activated charcoal for filtration. These extracts would be applied to the roots of the Salix tree, in hopes that it would allow the Salix tree to be replanted in their glade. He had thought that the psychite plants that could be grown on polluted soil held some sort of secret and might be able to stabilize the roots. And the tea extract was completed. The next attempt was an ambrosia extract made in the same sort of fashion. Ambrosia was a plant that seemed to sprout out from underground. He speculated that the ambrosia had adaptations to detect pollution, or at least detect ideal growing conditions which triggered its sporadic and unpredictable sprouting. Maybe it held the key to relocating Salix trees. And last but not least, a hybrid extract. One of tea and ambrosia, stabilized by herbal medicine. The plan was to have him, Sapo, and Dave head out to yet another glade. Sapo would help excavate the trees, and Megahoof would apply the tinctures of extract, each different extract applied to a separate tree, and then they'd observe for roughly a third of a day whether or not the trees decayed back into the ground. Dave was invited along because Megahoof sensed he yearned for adventure, and the added security was helpful as well. The best time to leave would be right after the Advent celebration, which was just a day and a half away. The smog subsided, and through the efforts of cleaning and mining buffers around the keep, the farms were largely unblighted. Arauco was about half finished with his sculpture. He had been working on it for days as the others looked on. Arauco enjoyed sculpting while most of the other adults were asleep. He needed significant practice, which resulted in wasting a lot of stone, and didn't want to feel judged by the others for appearing to be wasteful. He found himself making more mistakes than usual, and figured a good night's sleep was long overdue. The moon crested the cold night sky and ushered in the final day of winter, the day Shellbell would enter his toddler years. Lazarus and Tangier had benefited from watching Megahoof and Judea figure out parenthood, and they knew what to expect. Traditionally, adult children were raised communally, with neighbors, grandparents, aunts, uncles, and older cousins aiding in the childcare. The squires may have lacked the guidance of their elders when raising Bash, but they had helped take care of other youngsters back on the coast, so they were at least familiar with how much effort it would be. Lazarus and Tangier tucked Shellbell into his new bed. Shellbell was excited to be considered a big kid. He got up and sat on his bed and chatted with Madsy about all the things he could do outside the walls. Instead of enlightening Shellbell to the horrors that lurk outside the walls, Madsy told him stories about a brave knight that guarded the gate, keeping everyone safe. But Shellbell didn't realize the story was about his father. Halfway through the improvised tale, Shellbell had fallen asleep. Megahoof returned to regular research, which felt strange to him after having spent weeks studying tree roots and tree slabs. His research assumed that at least one of the 3 experiments would prove to be successful, and the islets would have more purified and arable land to cultivate. He still dreamed of the day where orchards of fruit trees thrived and fields of wheat and maqui glistened in the sun. If the bison glade was to support the burgeoning population of the coastal community, they'd need to expand their glade farms significantly. It was starting to warm up in the last day of winter, and soon the new crop fields would be converted back to open air, and Sapo was very excited about sowing seeds for specific meals this year round. As dusk settled, Megahoof, Sapo, and Dave were restless. Megahoof had shared his plan with the rest of the Adlets that after the Advent ceremony, the three would depart with most of the bison and head to Western Glades. Dave was eager for adventure, but Megahoof and Sapo did not share in that sentiment. The Adlets had been lucky so far not to be attacked by monsters, giant hornets, or other creatures of the forest, but their luck could run out. Additionally, the expansion of the bison glade largely depended upon the success of the experiments, and Megahoof was racked with worry that he had overlooked crucial details or omitted potential factors. The Adlets came together to celebrate another winter endured. This year they had not only survived, but thrived, and the winter passed by so quickly as a result. It was also a ceremony of hope that soon the glade would become a grove filled with salix trees. The Adlets looked up at the sky as the lanterns drifted out of view, then hugged Megahoof, Sapo, and Dave and wished them safe travels before they departed. The three Adlets hastily packed for their trip. The journey was short, and not many provisions were packed. Bringing most of the bisons might attract raiders to their caravan, but this was a risk they needed to take. The salix trees were massive and heavy, and every able-bodied bison would be needed to help sledge the trees back to the glade. Dave's spent time in isolation paid off, and he was healthy enough for travel. In their haste, they even managed to forget to pack the extracts, but luckily Megahoof realized before they had left the glade. They had not packed sleeping rolls either, and the three would come to regret that blunder. Somehow, the extract fumbled out of the bison's pack, and Megahoof realized the mistake and told Dave and Sapo to rest so he could fetch the crucial tincture. The other atlas looked at Megahoof quizzically as he scoured the hills around the keep in search for the dropped extract. Their excursion had already gone awry. Hopefully it was not a foreboding sign. Megahoof raced to rejoin Dave and Sapo, but unfortunately the mishap had waylaid the trio and cost them a significant amount of precious daylight. Sapo hadn't prepared additional bread for the pantry. Hopefully it would last until they returned, but if not, they could always rely upon the dried meat and packaged Mackie. Arauco's sculpture was taking its final form, and appeared to be nearly completed and readied for display in the new prayer room. He knew that there was very little free time for trivial pursuits like art and sculpture, so despite feeling inspired, he had to come to grips with how he'd not likely have many opportunities to express himself with art. The others spoke of lofty goals and prosperous futures, but Arauco hadn't bought into that dream. He largely lived one day at a time and tempered his expectations. The caravanning trio spotted another pristine glade and few salix trees on the horizon. Their short journey was done. Megahoof told Dave and Sapo to work on constructing a temporary pen so the bison wouldn't stray away from the herd. The last trip the group took, Tralalero wandered from the group, and Tangier had to split from the caravan to return for the calf, and Megahoof wanted to avoid breaking up the caravan like they had already done with the dropped extract. Megahoof told Dave not to bother with a log shelter. They wouldn't likely stay in this glade for more than a day. They searched for the bedrolls they had thought they had packed, but much like the tinctures, the rolls were also forgotten. Dave shrugged and said he was fine roughing it, and Sapo said that at least the soil was clean and pure and the grass was lush and soft. Megahoof spotted some of the hornets to the west, and cautioned the others to steer clear. The bison were rounded up into a makeshift pen. They were well accustomed to tight quarters as their shelters back home were tiny and overcrowded. Megahoof hoped his experiments would prove successful and allow the bison to freely roam the hillsides of the glade someday soon. Magoof's plan was to locate 3 different salix trees so his 3 extracts could be tested individually to see if they were effective in preventing the trees from disintegrating. He hadn't witnessed the trees disintegrating himself, so he also wanted to witness the process firsthand. The extracts would be stored next to each tree so they could be applied immediately after they were uprooted. He asked Dave to watch over the herd while he and Sapo conducted the experiments. They located 3 trees. The northernmost would receive the ambrosia extract, to the southeast the tea extract, and the last tree to the south a mix of both tea and ambrosia. Oroco finished his sculpture. The craftsmanship and artistry was of excellent quality. It abstractly depicted a hornless bison, but with a strange adlet-like quality about its face. The adlets were quite satisfied with his work, even though he himself wished it more closely resembled the bison instead. Magoof signaled to Sapo he was ready for the tree to be uprooted. Magoof knew he had to work quickly to apply the extract, as the trees rapidly disintegrated. He readied the tincture of ambrosia and applied it as soon as the roots were exposed to the polluted air. Magoof readied the next experiment with tea extract and planned to check back on the ambrosia-treated salix tree once all 3 experiments had been conducted. Ideally, he wished he could do them one at a time and observe the results, but the trio were endangered out in the Monster Patrol wilds, and he knew it was reckless to spend so much time for proper observation. The final experiment used the hybrid extract. Sapo worked to uproot the tree and planned to also find the queen bee from the adjacent hive so they could set up another apiary for honey. Just as the trio were ready to wrap up their long day with a rough night's sleep on the forest floor, it started to rain. The 3, who were originally optimistic about their excursion, laughed at the cruelty of the weather. The 3 settled into the driest spots they could find and were eager to check up on the trees in the morning, hoping they'd have some salix to haul back to the glade as trophies. Thank you for tuning in to episode 18 of Hedge Knights, Experimentation. If you would like to support me as a content creator, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing this with your friends. If you would like to support me directly, a link to Patreon can be found in the description of the video. If you would like to join my gaming community, a link to Discord can be found there as well. Thank you so very much for watching. A special thank you to my Patreon patrons, Twitch subscribers, and viewers like you that support the channel and made it all the way to the credits. Thank you so very much. I hope to catch you next episode. Farewell, my fellow adlets,